This week we have Graham Furnis back as just presenting, and he's been on ThoughtRock a number of times, and this week's topic is release management necessary? And Graham is a senior consultant at ThoughtRock, and he's fully immersed and passionate in providing ITSM solutions. He's business driven as an IT professional with 20 plus years of technology and management experience. He's certified as an ITIL manager and expert, as well as an accredited ITIL instructor. So before I turn it over to Graham, just a reminder again, if you have questions or comments, please do put them into the go-to panel, and we'll try to address them either on the fly or try to get to everybody's questions before we sign off at the end. So with that, I'll turn that over to Graham. Hey, Graham.
Great. Well, thank you, Rick and Wanda, and welcome everyone in the ThoughtRock community. So it's great. It's been a while since I've been doing a presentation at lunch, and for today we're back at the topic. I love the transition area. So we're back looking at release management and asking the question up at the top here. Make sure my mouse is working. So is release management really necessary? And here's my consulting answer to that is it depends. A good manager's response. Of course, it depends upon what kind of adoption you are going through within your organization and what your priorities are. Generally speaking, I'll leave that question open until the end and then give you my thoughts on it. But what we're going to do is just sort of run through and understand a bit more about the differences and integrations between change and release. There's certainly a ton of information here, but we'll just focus at it from the high level, get the good concepts of understanding the differences and interactions and integrations, and then this will give us a good sense about how we need to divide our activities. So as I like to do in a lot of cases, this time I'm going to start off and just give us a good picture of the ITIL framework and see which area we're working from. And here we are, the red square up in the upper right corner. Release and deployment management, we're working in the this whole transition module up here. And of course, I say we're working in this this lifecycle phase, but of course, everything is integrated in the lifecycle framework. So lots of inputs and outputs going in all directions, both within that service transition phase, and of course, it needs to link through all the other phases from the top service strategy. Certainly our release activities have to be aligned. That's the central ITIL theme. We need to understand what it is we are actually trying to operate under, the whole concepts of utility and warranty out of design. And of course, we need to not just simply release things into the live environment, but we have to be able to support and operate. And always, the ITIL framework has ongoing continual improvement, which of course feeds back into everything, including release and deployment management. So, but in general, we're talking really up here about our transition phase, and again, I made the sort of comment in the intro to the slides and the presentation that you may have received that release and deployment management, is it really needed? Why can't we just do everything with change? Whoops, that's the wrong one. Where's change management? Up here. So why can't we just do everything with change management? And for the most part, I think a lot of people are getting to realize there's definitely a difference in a division, but I still get a few questions and confusions between them, and that's what our presentation today will clear up. So let's start off with a slide that has some ITIL wording in here to take a look at what is release and deployment management. And I think for the rest of the presentation you'll notice I like the short form of just referring to release. It includes deployment management, but it saves a bit of typing, so release and deployment management is assumed by release and change. So the first thing I've done in this slide, and you'll notice that there's a couple of key similarities between the two. So both these different and distinct processes have two main goals at the top here, which is to respond to customer changing business requirements And of course, this is key up here because this is part of staying aligned to the business, and as I like to do in my business cases, stay relevant to the business, that you're doing what they need. And then both things, you need to make changes because things break, things require modification. You need to keep all your systems running and restore any deviations back to operations. So both are involved and have goals that try to accomplish those two things. And then if I bring up each one and just sort of give some of the ITIL definition for these. So with release management, it's all about protecting that live environment where things are up and running and working as efficiently as possible. The way we can do that is that release management focuses on these particular things, planning releases, building them, testing, and deploying into that production environment. And they ensure that it's accepted and of optimal implementation based upon the customer. So the customer has a customer acceptance piece that they go through with release. And operation and support also have an acceptance piece to play within release management, or release and deployment. So then let's compare a bit further down here. And these are the sort of the ITIL words around what change is trying to do, the objectives to keep those top level goals. So they're ensuring that each change delivers value. So that's the key piece right here. They ensure that each change causes minimal service disruption to the live environment. So it might look a little bit similar between these two. And then ensures each change is completed in a controlled manner. Sort of meaning, in a way, that it's properly planned, built, tested, and deployed. And then in terms of value, I can even do a few more things in this diagram. If you think about ensures each change delivers value, in whose eyes is value determined? Well, it's determined, of course, by the customer, but also by the people who have to support and maintain it every day, which is operations support. So, if we look at this, then, these are the ITIL words that come out and describe the two different processes. And for anyone who hasn't really seen the ITIL words and so on, you might, maybe I'll ask Rick, does this look like it's a very clear differentiation between changes and release?
I would suggest not. No, not really.
Yeah, I've got the crossovers there, and it's kind of indicating that, on a high-level sort of conceptual point of view, they're both kind of doing the same thing. So we need to kind of take this and go a step further, have a bit more fun, and elaborate it out in my next slide. So, but hopefully you see one thing. Definitely release and change are related. So even if you don't have a formal release process or set of activities, you're doing them anyway. And if you don't have a set of formal change activities, well, you should. but in terms of what are these two trying to do? They're trying to accomplish the same thing, but they work hand in hand. And there's a certain way we'll look at here that makes them successful and helps us to answer that question: is release and deployment management really needed as a separate focus and a separate management area?
And so, Graham, Troy has just commented as well that there's no clarity between release, deployment, and change.
Yeah, and again, as I go through this, those three terms, release, deployment, and change, you'll see how it starts to unfold. So the main thing is they're all trying, right now, all of these things are trying to do the same thing. Let's make a change somewhere in our environment, and let's not mess it up. And but each one, again, has a distinct role to play. And again, I go back to that question of, is release really managed, or is release management really needed? Is change management really needed? We'll see in a minute how it kind of unfolds, and you can answer that question. So coming back another step here, I just want to go through again and cover just the definitions again. So release itself, and this helps to get to a simplification. So you need to understand what a release is before we start breaking the two apart. So it's a collection of hardware, software, documentation, processes, or any other components implemented as one or more approved changes. So it's basically, think of a release as a bundling of both hardware, software, and other capabilities in order to do something within the IT infrastructure. And of course, whenever you do anything, it's an update, a modification, or removal, which is the definition of a change. So when we look at the definition of the change down at the bottom here, it's the monitored and controlled addition or modification of something in the live environment. So this starts to kind of clarify the difference here. For change management, these are key words down here. Change monitors and it controls the progress. It's kind of a gatekeeper of the activities, those collections of hardware, software, and documentation that release is putting together. So basically, think of it as a change as being a stoplight function or a stoplight process in the ITIL framework. You can't go ahead and touch the live environment, even if you are release, until it's monitored and controlled and assessed through the change process. So we're going to see this keeps unfolding and getting quite a bit more clear. And again, these are just the ITIL definitions of the two. But again, release is the big thing. It's the collection of not, it could just be one thing, but a release is typically more than one thing. Hardware, software, documentation, it's a whole package out there that really brings some type of capability or some major update to our live environment. And it has to go through the, I've got a new term, the stoplight process of change management in order to know if we can go fast through a green. Yellow means slow down. We really want to look at this. There's high risk. And then, of course, red means it's very important and we need to stop because we think something's off track and take a relook at it. So first of all, I'm going to go down to another slide here. And again, try and put it together with the definitions and, again, some of the differences between change and release to see where they're needed. So in my little diagram here, configuration item, that's what the CI stand for. Those are just components of hardware, software, documentation, anything that needs to be put together to form a system, and then a release may be the entire system or a part of that system. So in this diagram, think of the release as the big picture. It's everything up here that you're working on with your developers that will be linked to one or more systems. So you might be doing a release, and it may update. Let's just use software for an example. Maybe you've got for this particular release, you require one major update to, let's just say it's a homegrown client management system. That may be this one large configuration item here. And at the same time, you're also doing a major update to some sister applications in finance billing. Right? So whatever your release might be, you're going to structure it, and release is the entire thing. It's the overall collection of what's being built, tested, authorized, and implemented into components. And of course, underneath a major system or whatever that initial top-level CI might be, you might be managing things at the service definition, and the CI might be the definition of what's in your service catalog. It's up to you. But either way, you're more than likely going to have several sublayers, right, of different components and how they link together and relate together. So think of the release as the big project. This is the big thing that I'm working on. And therefore, release has to plan the integration of all these different things down here, while for change is concerned about any of those configuration items by definition are things which will go into our operational environment and be used to operate the organization. So we're concerned about assessing all the different configuration items that make up a release. And then, again, being a stoplight process, we want to be able to say which ones can go quickly, which ones need a bit more assessment, and we're going to improve each one. So, another thing to think about as I kind of ease my way through these slides and talk about a bit more. I'll ask a question to Rick here. So, and this is another good thing about understanding between releases and change. So, Rick, in the diagram there, how many changes do you think in this simplified diagram would need to be raised in order to complete and get that release deployed into the live environment?
I am going to guess, I think 6.
Good math. So again, here's again a difference about release and change, and again a bit of a justification about even how to work between them. So yes, on surface it looks like we've definitely got 6 CI configuration items that we can raise change tickets through. And again, release is coming up, and it's got the big picture. It's got all the plans of all these pieces and how they fit together. And then what change is doing, the reason change is concerned at the CI or configuration level, is that as you're updating a major system, so let's say it's this one again over here, you might be doing small changes underneath it. There may be a desktop driver that needs updating. That may be the nature of that configuration item. There may be a database or server update needed for this one. So, we need to properly go through and assess each one of these, but a lot of them you may say, well, they're all alike and I don't need to look at the same thing twice. So here's where we can apply a little bit more of a definition, understand a little bit more about what release is trying to do to make it easier to check and control its components that are being put in, and understand again where change and release differ. So I'm going to go over to this diagram. And this diagram simply takes the same as the last one. So nothing's changed here. We have the definition of the release that we had before. It's the overall collection of everything. But then what I might do to it, I might say, instead of sending 6 change requests through the change process, I might be able to instead work with release packages. And the release package is a great thing which ties into the concept as well of deployment. When I do an upgrade for our internal client management system, so this particular configuration item part of the release, it might be that I don't want to bog my change process down with 6 separate records, because when I do the deployment, I'm going to deploy all of these things over the weekend. Let's say we're planning and hoping for the end of the month. So what I might do is say, the way that release knows how to, again, here's the key words, release is doing all the work. They're building, they're testing, they're authorizing. They know what they're doing. And then they're going to implement part of the deployment concept. So when you start building up your release, you have to build down and say, here's all the different components I need to build and to test. But then once I start putting it together, am I going to put them onto the live environment one at a time? Might do that. Or I might say, no, it's going to be done as a package, and therefore I want to be able to test the entire package. I want to be able to deploy the entire package. Maybe the entire package is phased as a deployment. But if you're starting to do that with your release, then when it comes down to change, why don't we just have a package that we create a change record for? And when we're assessing the overall package, when change has that stoplight process of saying we need to go slow or fast, we need to ask questions and stop it, it may as well do it on the entire package, because whatever level you're deploying at is really the way I like to work, is how I like to send things through my change process. So really, it's not just a simple black and white rule that change management requires a change record for every configuration, you can create one change record that has multiple configuration items, and then to help assess it, so to help people in the CAB meeting stay on track, we can just simply say, well, this overall change record, which contains the release package, one of the justifications about why we're doing it is related to the release. And then when we get the next change record, same pointer, hey, here's another package related to the entire release. And that way we have 2 CAB meetings talking about these 2 separate packages rather than 6 separate meetings talking about all of the subcomponents, which probably isn't relevant, because we really want to, and again, the way I like to do things, we really want to manage things at a high, simple level, and I think it can be done by working at the package level coming from release, and then we just create one change ticket for it. So, so here's a little tip, at least something I found as a success factor. Make use of your release packages and understand the concept of what you're deploying, not so much the timing of when you're deploying things. Right, I can roll these out into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This might happen the end of this weekend, the following weekend, to a different user group, whatever it might be. But still, it's a package. It's all been tested by release. And again, what you're starting to see here is that it really is good to have someone try to coordinate the big picture for change, because that's not change's role. Change's role is simply to be there and be a stoplight and analyze every change that's created. We need to properly assess it, give it a stop-go, and it's awfully handy if some other area, like release and deployment, can package things together to make our work a bit easier in change. Okay, so I think this is a key diagram. It's one where if you're not familiar with that concept, I think you'll get a lot of mileage and value out of it by going through it. So let's go through then a little bit of a flow between the activities of release management and change management. And again, it's going to be related to this diagram because release is focusing on the big thing, and then it'll package things and raise change tickets, which goes through the change process. So here we are. So my next slide compares and again, I use the short form, release and deployment management process and the change management process. So,
hey Graham, a quick question just looking at this. I see release plans. Is there a reason why change doesn't create plans?
Yeah, it's actually a key reason. And we've been kind of building up to this. With release management, a good way here I'll write it with my mouse. I'm getting awfully good with this. So the key thing about release management is that, release management, it does all the work. So when it comes to, we have a new thing going into our IT infrastructure, a new release, it has to do all the work planning it. And take a look at the words here, right? So we create the release plans. Change doesn't do that. In fact, I'll just put over here, no work. So, and take that with a grain of salt for a minute. But in terms of the traditional development environment, change doesn't do the work. Release management does the work. They create the release plans. They come up with all the details about here's all my subcomponents. Here's the way I'm going to deploy it. Here's my development and release standards about trying to assess the business impact of what I'm doing, and therefore here's the steps and the thoroughness I need to go through. Then it goes down to the next step, and it starts to either build or acquire the components, hardware, software, documents, operating process, whatever it might be. Then it goes through and does testing. And if you have a full-blown ITIL framework, that may be outsourced to another process area, so it's independent testing with testing and validation. Either way, has to be done as part of the software development lifecycle, or the development cycle, let's call it. And then we have to think about getting it out to the live environment. This is the deployment concept. So how are you going to get it out to different users? How are you going to package it? How are you going to phase it in? How are you going to train them? You have to make sure things are properly transferred to both users and customers. Provide early life support, because for sure nothing gets rolled out without a few glitches, and release management needs to react, may have to do some technical updates, whatever it might be. And then finally, it can review, and what it does, it reviews all these activities up here. So it reviews all of the activities. How did we do? Is this new release functioning in the live environment okay? And we can close our work. So if we look at the change side, and again, so the key thing here is that as I've drawn so far, and you look at these steps, and it's really centered around all the documents up here. So release management does the development work. They do it from the planning stage right through to the end stage. From a development point of view, change management does no work, which doesn't mean they don't do anything, but they do no development work. They're here simply to be an independent audit process. And they're making sure the right people have been involved and have basically signed off all the way through the change steps, but also the release steps. And so here's another integration about how these two things work. So when we start off with the change process, the first step here is that we record a record, right? So in change management, you have a ticket. In release management, you have the documented plans about how you're going to do the development. So you can see right away there's two different things. You need plans because you're doing complicated development work. Change management's an audit process. It needs a ticket to keep track of the audit. It's doing audit work, and it needs to keep track of that with a ticket, and that way everyone can access it and see how it's moving. So then change management says, well, okay, we need to review our ticket. And again, in this example, let's say we had 3 big work packages we planned out in release. So we may decide to create 3, and again, release will raise the change tickets. Part of my plans here is that release will raise the 3 change records necessary for these plans, because they can't get anything implemented until change authorizes it to be done. So we've got our 3 tickets, and then the next step here, we need to review it. Well, what do we review? We ask change management to submit the plans at a high level, and that's part of the initial review. And as well, we make sure it's all the information that I need to set up my cab and everything else. Is it now contained in my forms and tickets so I can do my audit activity? So notice I'm using the word audit activity as opposed to development activity in release and deployment management. So then we assess and evaluate within change. And again, what we're assessing is information in my tickets and the tried and true ITIL way of doing things. We're assessing the priority. So what's the impact of each change and the overall release, and what's the urgency at which we need to get through. This will help drive different levels of questions and inspection that needs to be done. We'll also do a little bit of a risk assessment because right, the higher the risk, the more diligence we have to go through. And then we get into say, okay, well now that we understand the change, let's review it so that we can authorize moving ahead with each piece of the development. So here's where your cab comes in, or whatever level of change you're dealing with. Again, we're dealing with an audit process. We're not developing anything. We're just trying to say, here's in the plans up top, here's where release is hoping to be able to deploy and implement. And we need to be able to authorize that that's a good time. It's not conflicting with anything else. We also need to make sure that all appropriate stakeholders from the business and IT have looked at this because they may be impacted and they may have information that can help us succeed. So then you get to the 5th step here, and it says coordinate implementation. Well, in my sort of books, the way I do things, change management doesn't coordinate implementation. What they do, they're an audit process, and they're simply giving multiple authorizations based upon the steps required to do work. So out of the cab, right, there might be a couple of people who suggest, you know, I like this change in this release package that you're doing, but I want you to make some updates on timing or whatever else because it may impact me. So the release people look at this and they say, fine, it makes sense to me. So they go and update the plans. They send a notice back to the change audit process that we've updated our plans and we've adopted the recommendations from step 4 in the CAB. And then change management says, great, green light, so go ahead and start doing your build or acquire. So now we go over here, right, and you can see a relationship. So now release management goes ahead, it builds or acquires, does whatever it wants. Change management is not doing that activity. It's just waiting for a little notice to come back from release saying, hey, we finished building or we finished acquiring what we need to. Again, change management says, thank you. I'm the audit process, and that's what I needed to know. You signed the fact that you've built or acquired on time or on schedule, or maybe you're off schedule and we need to make updates somewhere else, but everyone's in the loop. And then you get the authorization, well, you know, go ahead, in fact, it's a mandatory thing, start testing. And when you finish testing, show me the test results. Not that we don't trust you, but we're changed the audit process and we want to have independent verification of those testing results. So again, release is doing that work and it's generating the tests and it's collecting the test results, shows it back to the change process. Here we go, independent test results, here's what it means, it's all as planned. And then change management says, great, another green light. So you've gone through all the steps successfully. So now you need to deploy and implement. And I'll kind of group these together here. So when we're deploying and implementing, show me your deployment plans because surely if it's a lot of good development fails through bad deployment. So show me these well thought out, appropriate to the risk level kind of deployment plans. And as long as they're there, you get the authorization to go ahead and implement, deploy as planned. Give me an update when you've actually started to do the transfer or deployment or retirement, whatever you're doing. Keep me informed at each stage. It may be a phased implementation. So at each phase, you report back to change management. And change management's just following the checklist to make sure you've done what you said you're going to do. And then it's sitting in the live environment. And change management says, okay, is release still supporting and running into any issues? Again, report it back to the change process and let us know the results and any resulting incidents that may have happened. And then finally, we get to, you know, things are out there, they're accepted, they're stable. So now we get to, just like in release management, review and close. And they're two separate things. Change management is not going to review how good the release plans were, how good the deployment plans were. They're going to review their thing, which is how well did we audit through that entire change process? How well did we audit these changes that made up a release? So were we correct in assessing the overall change tickets, and did we drive it through the right part of the cab? Did we get the right information back when coordinating or auditing each step? So that's what it's doing, right? There's no crossover here between development, which is release focus, and audit, which is the change focus.
Hey, Graham, just a couple of questions if we can, because there's questions related, I think, to this slide. So first question is there no audit in release management?
There's a release audit, and it's not a defined step, but it's contained here. And every company needs to set up its rules about reviews and audits. So an audit is can be a big or small thing, but typically audits associated with a lot of work. So at the end of a sort of more significant kind of release, because a release could be something very simple. I'm adding a new field to a system. I may decide that my release teams are the ones doing it, and it's very small. I don't need a formal audit of my release process and activities for that kind of thing. But I really want to audit the major releases, the things that require big amounts of work. Same thing, there's a change audit too. Audit the big changes. Even as a process, go back and audit all changes over a period of time. Like release could go back and audit all releases over a period of time to see the kind of trends and are people following policies and those bigger things. So, but when it comes to these steps that are shown here, this is for how do you sort of work each individual implementation. So we have one release that spawned 3 separate changes. At the end, release will review that one release. If it's really big, they'll do an audit, but otherwise you just do a quick checklist and a quick assessment. Change does a quick assessment of its change tickets and the way it went through. A quick verbal. It doesn't have to be complicated and time-consuming. You could just have a change meeting, typically involve the stakeholders who are in the cab. The changes are in. Anyone feel that it didn't go well or any suggestions for improvement? Everyone comes back, nope, it looked good. You're done. So you can close your change ticket, and release will close its release. It depends how it does it. Usually there's not a release ticket, but there's either a project or could be another way of managing it, but they close that activity to say we're done, ready for moving on to new work.
Okay, and one more question is the change stoplight function sounds very similar to project management toll gates. Could you comment on that?
Oh, it's totally aligned. But of course, it is a separate thing because change management in the ITIL framework is specifically focused on the ITIL infrastructure, and anytime anything goes into the live environment, you're going to go through a defined and staffed and managed change process. On the project management side, every change to a project and its deliverables also has to go through change control. So every company is going to be a bit different on this. You don't want to be overly bureaucratic. You can use ITIL's change control when it comes to the product type of things within a project. But when it comes to updating project documents and plans, ITIL doesn't want to see that. ITIL doesn't care about things that aren't IT related. So that's a separate project change control issue. So they obviously integrate and overlap, but know the difference. It's not IT, hardware or software related. It's not a configuration item issue. That's where it falls off of the change management plate.
Okay, and sorry, one more, and I think it's just a good time because we had some questions queued up here. So one more question before you can move on. I know we're tight for time here. Can you discuss?
Actually, we're pretty good.
Oh, are we? Okay, good. So can you discuss, quote, deployment to different environments like development, testing, integration, production, etc.? Can you discuss specifically deployment to those various environments?
I can. I know the general nature of that question is that it's all in this part here. ITIL's deployment. Let me start there. ITIL's deployment is going on to the live environment. So that's what this diagram is showing here. But between the release steps 2, 3, and 4, you have different. This is more of a development concept. So you have different promotions to. Depends on how you do things in your organization. You typically do things in phases and typically by release packages. So the release packages may go through specific testing environments. The individual components may be developed at the developers level, and then it's packaged. The packages go through the test environment levels. You may go through pilots, and the pilots may be in a semi-secure part of the operational or live environment. All of those things, every time you move something forward, that requires to be documented and planned and managed in the release process, and it needs to be audited and confirmed to go ahead in your change process. So step 4 over here, often these process flows don't capture everything in a perfect way. because you may have lots of sub-steps in your testing and even in your building that requires going to different environments for validation. So if that's the case, you just build it into your release plans, and whatever you build into your release plans, because you've submitted it, change will know over in step 5 what you're trying to coordinate and what you need to show progression through. Or a change may say, look, it doesn't really matter until you hit the live environment. So do whatever you want to do on the release side. We don't care. So in here, you're sending a whole bunch of things through multi-levels of testing and pilots and any type of rehearsals and so on that you can do. And then when you're ready to go to the live environment for real, that's when change says, come back to me then, show me the results of all of those things in one nice simple report. That way I cut my work down and I'm still effective, because it's really when you do the final deployment, that's what counts. So you may manage things that way. So all I'm saying is, again, you don't have to be bureaucratic and have all those levels go through change. You may just want to leave it to when finally it's going to go to the live environment. And here's a summary of all those test environments and so on. And you may let release manage going between those different testing gates, or you may say, no, we're going to make it a bit more official. We'll let change control all those progression gates, if you want to call it that. Any other questions that come up on this one, Rick?
No, I think that's good, Graham. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, Rick, we're pretty much at the end, because this is really what I wanted to focus on. This is where you can see the difference, and at this point you can answer the question. I've got 2 slides just with a couple of other key thoughts. But is release management needed? So my take on that is yes, and that you're doing it anyway, because no matter what, if you're in any type of IT environment, even if you're not developing things, you're requiring it, and it has to be deployed, even if you're using an outside third party. So release management is needed because you need someone doing the work, and to be a good change process, it's like a stalled car. If you make change also your development process, then it's really hard to push the car and steer the car at the same time, and you tend to cheat a lot. So my take on these 2 processes, and to answer the question which made up our presentation today, is release really needed? Yes, you do need release management. It needs to be a separate concept about here's how we do, and I'm going to manage the doing according to my good lessons learned and practices. And by doing that, I separate it from change, and I can just let change focus on being that stoplight process, or having that auditability to say, I'm just here to make sure there's a change record for everything you do, and that we go through the proper checks and balances to say, if you can potentially really mess up our company's operating environment, let's go slow, do all the proper checks and get everyone involved. And if it's really simple, I'm just going to rubber stamp it and forget the cab. It goes through because it's very simple and risky. And that's what change should do. They shouldn't be involved in the doing, in my opinion. That's Graham's thoughts. So the last 2 slides I can do in a few seconds here. Just a couple of other thoughts about. Oh, sorry, I've got a little animation here about how those plans and documents cycle through the change process. But again, they don't do it. They just take a look at those to be able to properly review, assess, and authorize, and then follow the plans that they're being done to plan. So here. Oh yeah, I'm missing the text. There it is. So a couple of success factors. Good concept here is that there's a couple of interconnected pieces. You typically are doing all 3 of these, but just recognize every time, I'll start in the middle, every time I create a change, it changes for a configuration item over here. Well, you should have somewhere out there configuration saying at what level are we identifying our components. So typically you never want to whenever you implement this part of the ITIL framework, change, configuration, and release, in my opinion, and according to lots of the text, but in my opinion, they're always three separate things. Quite often people do combine change and configuration, and that actually works out not too bad, but release is always separate. But you want to do all three of these. You need to know what your CI definitions and identifiers are, because they need to be in your change tickets. Release is busy doing the big level plans to group all of those things together, and if you don't have CIs defined, then how do you communicate back and forth between change and release? So, and of course, release is the one, configuration is the one defining all of these things. So think about these three separate areas. You need all three of these to be successful in either one. Well, of course, the most important thing being change and release. But you can't be successful in change and release if you're speaking a different language. The common language is having a proper understanding of what a configuration item is. And when you're making a release bundled up with these things and creating changes, you're talking about the same things. So that's one of the little success factors. And then just a couple of more here. Service level management. This is important because release is releasing something into the live environment. So this drives all the way through the framework. Somewhere there should be a business case, and hopefully if you're doing it linked with project management, you know, on those projects you've got a good business case about why you're doing things. And you know, service level management is always concerned about defining things at a service level. So your releases are going to tie into that same definition. Here's a release. What service is it affecting? Because the way you've defined the importance of that release, that element of your service catalog and the release supporting it, that's going to make a big difference in justifying the work. And your release policies are based upon, you know, where you deliver the most value in the business and at what part of your service catalog are you touching. So in my opinion, service level management is a big driver to link into release management. And then operationally, right, transition and release and change have to transition things into the live environment. In my programming days, I recall many times releasing things. You're forced to get it out there while still a few unknown bugs are in the system. So you need problem management to track those known errors, right? We found them during testing. Let's not lose track of them. Let's not try and keep track of them on our own. If we have a formally defined problem management and known errors database, you know, let's use that. Let's tie it to our incident tickets and you know, get a good sense of when I have to do my next release update. You know, I'm going to use my metrics from the operational environment. And of course, incident keeps telling you what's working and what's not working. So if you get a release followed by a whole bunch of unexpected incidents, more than normal, maybe you want to update your release practices and policies handbook. So, so that's it. So those are the main success factors, and that wraps us up.
So we have some more questions here, Graham. So
Yep.
just before the end here. So a couple questions. I'll maybe bring these two together. So have you heard of companies protecting one environment back from live and also the live environment? And then this kind of add-on is also change obviously has a ticket. Are there release tickets as well? I guess you can't really combine those two. So we'll just answer the first question. Have you heard of companies protecting one environment back from live and also the live environment? I don't know if you need more clarification or if you understand what the question is.
I'm just trying to actually clarify it. So protecting one environment back from live?
That's what the question says, yeah. So you know what, I'll ask David to clarify the question. Let's move on to the next question.
Yeah, no, I actually think I got both.
Okay, okay.
Because, yeah, in terms of, I'll go backwards. Tickets, you always have a change ticket. Release ticket, you can do that too. I like tickets for a whole bunch of reasons. So no, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people don't do release tickets, and I think actually there'd be a lot of benefit if you do, because with a ticket you can just manage the progression of something. And if you're doing a release, you may as well manage it through a ticket, and then everyone else can get visibility to it. Going back to the different environments, so I think that question was saying, do you see having change management on I think it said one level back from the live environment. So I'm going to assume that means you have an operational environment, you have a testing environment, you may have different parts of that testing environment and different people in control of it. And the answer is yes, I have seen plenty of companies go through and have multiple levels of change control. I would have a word of warning, though, that putting that through the regular change process increases the complexity of what the change process has to deal with, because you have to coordinate both environments, right? It's part of the main thing. If my testing environment doesn't match my live environment, then what good is your testing environment? And that's one of the things that change will always look for in its regular process. So, whatever is done to a production environment, there's automatically a check for all related environments out there. So has your testing environment received the same update? Have your contingency backup environments also received the same update? So you really have to know your infrastructure well to know when you're doing any type of change, if there's any related environments, not just within the release side, but again, don't forget security and continuity side of things. There's a lot of environments out there, and you need to make sure the same changes go through. What you may have is a sub-level to manage those areas. You may have, for example, if you have a formal testing and validation process, that may have its own internal, I don't want to call it the wrong thing, but it may have its own checks and balances with its own change control, just to make sure from release, when different things are coming in, you're scheduling out your testing environment, and you're making sure what's going in and what's coming out, and you're keeping track of it with those change tickets. But I would like to see that in a perfect world separate from the ITIL defined change process, because it really muddies the water, and muddy water is a bad thing to try and swim in. So hopefully that's clarified that one. And anything else come up on the list, Rick?
No, I think we're good, and the answer back on that was exactly. So I think you nailed it, so that's fantastic. So again, I know we're getting close to the end here. I want to thank everybody. The one thing, Graham, about your sessions, I will say, is for the number of attendees that were here at the beginning, all those attendees are still here at the end. So that tells me that you're doing a fantastic job, and I think the one thing we always enjoy about Graham's sessions is they are 100% educational. I think they're practical in their approach, and hopefully people that were on the line have some great takeaways, and just keep your eye out for Graham's sessions, because they're always with the same format. So thanks again, Graham. That was fantastic. We have our contact information up here. If anybody wants to reach out and get some other questions to Graham, we're more than happy to facilitate that at info@thoughtsrock.com. You just kind of subject line could be question for Graham, and we'll make sure that gets over to him.